All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Nick here. We're reacting to the news of Bill O'Brien finally departing Alabama for the NFL, returning to the New England Patriots under Bill Belichick to be the offensive coordinator there. We knew this was likely going to come, Nick. A couple days ago when we did the Pete Golding news, when he departed for Ole Miss, we said that we would likely be making another coordinator change video with some potential candidates. So we're going to break that down here today. As it now is official, Bill O'Brien, the last 2 years, I thought were quite successful at Alabama. Bryce Young set multiple records in 2021, about 40 points per game that year, in or out to a Heisman Trophy victory. From a points per game number, they went up this year, 41 of those. And I thought the Bill O'Brien overall had a very solid tenure here, Nick. This is a guy that's obviously much better suited for the NFL. I think most people would agree. I think that's why it makes sense that leaves. Patriots offense, they need a coaching boost. They have some really young talent. Mac Jones leading the forefront of that. And their offense has certainly struggled the last couple of seasons. So Bill Belichick decides to reunite here. My overall thoughts on this, though, the NFL is his true calling, and there's some tensions rising at Alabama, I'd say, regarding his job status. Overall, I thought Bama did pretty good on offense. 150 rushing yards per game last year. Big boost this year, 195. Jahmyr Gibbs, I had no problem with his usage. He led the team in receptions, over 6 yards per attempt. Obviously, there was some issues at times with the pass catchers this year. A very young bunch. They really struggled to gel together. Bryce Young really carried this offense. Overall, I thought Bill O'Brien did a very solid job, Nick, but you disagree. What are your thoughts on, kind of a differing opinion here? Because I thought Bill O'Brien was solid. I do think he should be in the NFL, though. But, what was your biggest complaints with Bill O'Brien, and why are you glad that he's gone?
It may not be that he didn't do a great job. I think it was just disappointing compared to what the expectation was when he came in. Alabama went back to the NFL to grab a coordinator for the third time in 4 tries. They grabbed Brian Daboll from the NFL when he was offensive coordinator. Now, of course, Daboll, successful year at the Giants. They grabbed Steve Sarkisian from the NFL. Of course, successful year with Texas. And then before that, Mike Locksley came back from the college game. Bill O'Brien looked like it could be a good fit. Had college experience at Penn State, of course. In the wake of that scandal at Penn State, he really kind of stabled the ship. That team had no scholarships, and they had winning records under him. Then he went to the NFL, fell apart in Houston, comes to Alabama, and just doesn't really live up to expectations. What really bothered me was some of the play calling in really crucial moments. There were several occasions on 4th down this past season. I can think of at least 2 or 3 in my head. I'm thinking of the LSU game, definitely the Texas game, where 4th and 1, 4th and 2. And the personnel and the formation that he put out was just totally ill-prepared for the play that they needed to do. On 4th and 1, they're lining up in the shotgun formation, and it's just not a recipe for success. And things like that is what really bothered Alabama fans this season. Was I a little harsh on him at times? Yes, I will agree that I think overall the product of work is not too bad. It certainly doesn't help when pass catchers are dropping the ball when Bryce Young was really putting it into a perfect spot for them. But I really think Alabama needs a young, forward-thinking offensive mind that is more adjusted to the game. I think Bill O'Brien coaches more of an outdated style of play, a pro-style, offense that will fit really well in New England. I think it will work well with Mac Jones and the talent they have in New England. I just think that Alabama has kind of evolved, and college football as a whole has evolved. We've seen it this past season with the offenses, like Garrett Riley had at TCU. Offenses have evolved over the past couple of seasons. I think we need to get a new, fresh face in Tuscaloosa that can kind of develop an offense that's more adapt for the college game this day and age.
And Nick, of course, is an Alabama fan and student, so he's not just some outside guy trying to stir up some noise. Those are his honest thoughts. And that's a good thing you brought up, though, was the LSU and Texas game, because I do recall watching those games going, the offense is incredibly stale. I mean, the amount of punch they had in both of those games, especially against Texas, and in the second half, they were just abysmal. Bryce Young saved the day on the final drive, game-winning field goal. But I do remember those 2 games that were decided by 1 point, where the offense was incredibly stale and really lacked creativity. So that was certainly something that was incredibly disappointing. Looking at the first candidate here, Kliff Kingsbury, this was obviously one that I brought up over a month and a half ago because many anticipated he'd be ousted in Arizona as the Cardinals head coach. Quick timeline on Kliff Kingsbury. Remember, he got fired from Texas Tech after the 2018 season. Winning seasons were pretty rare at Texas Tech despite having crazy offenses. If you remember, Patrick Mahomes had a phenomenal career at Texas Tech. Johnny Manziel in 2012 when he was at A&M, the only year he had in College Station, won the Heisman Trophy. Kingsbury booked a one-way ticket to Thailand after pretty unsuccessful tenure, I would say. They did win double-figure games last year with the Cardinals. But this offense, Nick, over the 4 year, never really sparked. It was not from a lack of talent. Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, Christian Kirk. I mean, this team had plenty of talent to get things done. Even Marquise Brown this past year, just unsuccessful, and that led to his eventual termination after not being able to win games this year or have the offense head in the right direction. I think the biggest reason why it makes sense is boost in explosiveness and creativity for Alabama because he kind of reminds me of the Lane Kiffin tenure at Alabama. This is an offense that for years was I formation, very simplistic, not much creativity one bit. Lane Kiffin shows up 2014 through 2016. They were going empty formation, 5 wide, splitting things out. That's something we never saw from Alabama, and that's what the Tide have really been with the last couple of years since Lane Kiffin left. He really opened up this new identity to Nick Saban's eyes, and I think Saban was thrilled with it because they've really not changed. Of course, the quarterbacks he was working with, Jalen Hurts as a freshman, Blake Sims and Jake Coker. So he wasn't exactly working with the greatest of talents at that time. Of course, Hurts has now developed into an NFL MVP caliber, but his freshman year was not all pretty. And, this is an Alabama team that's going to continue pulling 5 stars. Ty Simpson, of course, is waiting in the wings and overtakes this job. We'll have him to work with the next couple of years. The offense with Arizona never really took a turn, though, Nick. I think that's why the concern is certainly out there. Has Kliff lost his touch? I don't think so. But I think this makes great sense. This is a very exciting hire. Obviously he got fired from Texas Tech, went to USC for a couple of weeks, ended up landing an NFL job. What guy gets fired and lands a better job? Kliff Kingsbury does. That's because his offense is that great and his mind is that bright. What are your thoughts on this?
I think this pick, Kliff Kingsbury makes a lot of sense. Those offenses he had at Texas Tech were fantastic with not a whole lot of talent. I mean, Patrick Mahomes coming out of high school is not considered a very talented quarterback. Of course, he had the raw talent. Obviously, Mahomes has developed into the star in the NFL. But when he was playing at Texas Tech, Mahomes wasn't really a household name. And Kliff Kingsbury turned that into a high-flying offense that put a ton of points up. Manziel, also not a household name when he came into College Station, turned him into a superstar overnight. So Kliff Kingsbury certainly has the opportunity to develop talent and kind of get the best out of guys that really have not found the best talent. And when you bring him to a school like Alabama, where he's going to have 5 stars at quarterback, I think the sky is the limit with Kingsbury. There certainly is a difference between coaching in the NFL and being an offensive coordinator in college. It'll be a lot more of a lighter load. Doesn't really have to focus on sort of the X's and O's and the ins and outs of running a NFL team. And he can focus on drawing up a great offensive play with quarterbacks that will be young, a lot of talent, a lot of raw potential. The explosiveness, the creativity will certainly be there. I think the offenses in Arizona were not great, but I think Kyler Murray also plays a role in that. I don't think Kyler Murray is living up to the expectations that he has as a former number 1 overall pick, and I think some of that's on him and not necessarily all on Kingsbury. The big question mark here is Kingsbury willing to take this job? He said that he bought a one-way ticket to Thailand. Is he going to come back from Thailand? Is that a serious thing? Is he joking? What is his availability? What is his openness to take a job like this? I think this makes a lot of sense for both parties involved. But I'm not sure if Kingsbury is going to make this decision to come back into the coaching game so quickly and come to Alabama.
One thing I said to you as a USC fan, of course, is a perfect job for him this year, if he were to come back, was to be an offensive analyst at a school like USC. He's in a nice city. He can just put his feet up and relax. And that kind of seems like a reality now that he's booked that one-way ticket to Thailand. I do think that is legit. And I do think him taking a year off is certainly the most likely scenario here. But it's kind of interesting that I say that, and that's kind of seems like what he's leaning forward towards. So I definitely think taking an offensive coordinator position at Alabama seems unlikely with, the pairings of things that I've said compared to what he's now doing. So interesting to see. I would think that Kingsbury would be great at Alabama. It'd be fun to watch. Next up, Adam Gase, a name that many people have probably not heard in a while. Ex-New York Jet head coach, who was also with the Dolphins before that as the lead man. Some notable experience from him. He's been in the NFL since 2005 to 2020 when he got fired from the Jets. Why it makes sense. He reunites with Saban. He was a defensive assistant with LSU from 2000 to 2002. And he also seems to thrive with less responsibility. He was great as an offensive coordinator, which led to him landing those jobs in the NFL as a head coach over a 5-year span. And I think one thing that's certainly a concern is he took 2 years off following an abysmal time with the Jets. Maybe he's been a high school coach out there somewhere, which probably has. But he has not been at one of these top levels in the last couple of years. His inability to adjust his scheme, though, Nick, really hurt him. He ran the exact same stuff pretty much from 2015 to 2020. So how much creativity will come to effect? Because there's a lot of tape out there on Gase, and he didn't do good with Sam Darnold, who was supposed to be the future there. And I also never seen him to take accountability ever. This is not a guy that I think is highly regarded in terms of a positive attitude. Plenty of red flags. But at the same time, this seems like the ideal candidate for the Nick Saban Rehab Center. What are your thoughts on Adam Gase potentially coming to Tuscaloosa?
Adam Gase definitely fits the whole Nick Saban career rehabbing department. And Adam Gase is a good coach. When you get down to it, of course, those seasons in Denver are really the ones that you kind of highlight here. That period where he had Peyton Manning and Peyton Manning had come off that injury. It looked like his career was kind of done. He leaves Indianapolis, ends up in Denver, and he has that record-breaking season 2013. Then 2014, he has the Super Bowl winning season, looked even better. The team got better. Overall, that offense was high flying, put up a ton of points, really productive offense, which I think is the kind of the big piece that makes Adam Gase look attractive here. I personally don't think this is the best move. His tenure at the Jets was an absolute disaster, fell apart very quickly. I mean, the Jets are the Jets, right? Coaching there is definitely a difficult job, but it fell apart so quickly. And he struggled with Sam Darnold, who was a pretty good college quarterback, came into the pros and just fell apart. I think Gase would be a bad hire for Alabama. I just don't think it makes a whole lot of sense for both parties involved. I think Adam Gase is going to continue to kind of sit out and find his time to get another job in college football or the pros. I just don't think he makes a lot of sense at this point in time.
Looking at Joe Brady, the current Bills quarterback coach. Now, this is a guy some people probably forgot about, and it makes sense, Nick. This is a guy that's coaching career kind of seems in flux. Josh Allen led the NFL in interceptions this past year, really did not seem to develop. And considering last time we saw him on the field before coming into 2022 was a phenomenal, heroic effort against Kansas City and a loss. And then he comes in here and he kind of regresses. I wouldn't say that he had the biggest fall from grace or anything like that. Still a very strong year from Josh Allen, but certainly did not go MVP caliber like many anticipated. Now, the Los Angeles Chargers did just request an interview with him to be the offensive coordinator there in LA, so we'll see what happens. Joe Brady, though, taking LSU's success out of the equation, of course, because he was the architect of, I think, the greatest offense of all time in 2019. Joe Burrow wins the Heisman, some great receivers that are already the best in the NFL. I mean, couldn't get any better than that. But when you take that out of the equation, because that's the one reason why it makes sense, I do think the scheme makes sense. It's a balanced offense, plenty of empty formations, a lot of horizontal spacing. It seems like I was alluding to earlier, Lane Kiffin, when he was there almost a decade ago at this point, that's the same stuff he was running, and it was very successful, and they certainly have a lot of talent here at Alabama. So I think in general, Joe Brady can certainly apply to this job. And again, his career is kind of in flux. Kind of want you to allude to that and why this would make sense for Brady, because I certainly think he should have a better job than what he does now. And this is the perfect opportunity if he gets the call.
Before Alabama hired Bill O'Brien, I wanted Joe Brady to be the offensive coordinator. I thought the season he had at LSU was fantastic. It was clear that with the talent they had there and sort of how he structured that offense, I thought he was the perfect fit to come in and take over after Steve Sarkisian left. Of course, Alabama ended up going with Bill O'Brien instead, and I think Joe Brady makes a lot of sense the second time around. Yes, the last couple of seasons have not gone fantastic for him. The work in Buffalo hasn't been fantastic, and of course the Panthers OC didn't go too great at all. They had a tough time there in Charlotte, but I think this would be a good opportunity in the college level. That offense we saw at LSU is the greatest single season from an offense of all time, right? The production they put up on the field, the numbers are ridiculous. The play they put up, the talent, everything that he got out of that offense is ridiculous. Joe Burrow, the single greatest season from a college quarterback, in my opinion. And this was the guy calling the plays. So I think Joe Brady makes a whole lot of sense, a more low-key role, kind of a less stress role than some roles in the NFL potentially, focusing on building the offense, kind of have the talent, the weapons that he needs, draw up the system he wants to use, a more vertical system, bit of a spread system. I think Joe Brady makes the most sense of anybody on the list so far. I think this would be a great hire for Alabama.
One thing I do think is a big concern is his only success came right after working with the Saints for 2 years. He gets mentored by Sean Payton, turns around as the passing game coordinator for LSU the next year, and obviously had that great season. But other than that, those 3 years right there, it's not been great. The last 3 years now, the other side. So, is that a concern for you that the last 3 have not been very spectacular for Brady?
I definitely think that is something to consider while looking at this. The time in Carolina was a mess, right? That offense was very poor. The whole field program was poor, but I think this past season in Buffalo is kind of the piece that I look at the most that concerns me, because Josh Allen should have improved, right? Josh Allen should have been getting better. Everyone expected Josh Allen to come in after last season and step up and lead the Bills to the promised land. And this year, his turnovers were up. He was making mistakes late in the game, several bad interceptions late in the game. I'm thinking the game in Minnesota overtime where he don't even know really who he was trying to throw it to. Josh Allen looked like he regressed this past season. And I think that's a lot on Brady, because Brady was the guy that was supposed to help build him and develop him like he did for Joe Burrow. And now the Bills, have struggled on offense, which is something you didn't think you'd say in the.
Now looking at Dan Mullen, I do not believe he's a candidate for the Nick Saban Rehabilitation Center, because Mullen could still be an asset somewhere at a high-end program. But this is a great fit for Mullen, I think. This is a guy that still, like I said, is a big-time asset still. Looking at some of the notable experience, he's been a head coach his last 13 years at the college level. Of course, he's taken this past season off to be an ESPN analyst, and I thoroughly enjoyed him in his appearances. He's a dynamic offensive coach, and he's a phenomenal QB developer. That 1 year at Florida Kyle Trask, Kyle Pitts, those guys, they had a phenomenal season. They won the East a couple seasons back. And I think that certainly goes unnoticed. Obviously, his attitude was a big problem late in his tenure, getting very testy with reporters. And that certainly was not great. And, I think that's why it might not make sense, Nick, is the last decade and a half almost he spent as a head coach. Is he willing to take a back seat, especially since the attitude was a big factor in his dismissal? Because I think the positives make plenty of sense, but is the negative worth Nick Saban gambling on? Because, again, I don't think this is a rehabilitation moment because Mullen is still an asset at other programs. Is Saban going to be willing to put up with it, and will Mullen put up with it for that?
Yeah, I think this one makes a lot of sense for Alabama. I'm not sure how much sense it makes for Dan Mullen. His time in the as an analyst this past season I thought was fantastic. I thought he did a great job on ESPN. And the time at Florida, yes, I know it fell apart, but this guy won the East just a few years ago in 2020, right? That Kyle Trask led offense was fantastic, and they hung around with Alabama in that SEC title game. I know they scored a couple points late to make it a little bit closer of a score, but they were hanging around for a while there. They gave Alabama some fits early on, and that was a really good Florida team, right? That finished second in the East, or finished first in the East and second in the SEC. Dan Mullen had a great time at Florida State, had some fantastic offenses there, and then went to Florida, had some good offenses as well. I think he got cut short a little too early. Yes, of course, it kind of losing to Samford and sort of some of the other stuff that came with it at Florida resulted in him losing his job. I thought he should have deserved a little bit more time in Gainesville, but that's sort of the, how it goes down there. They have a short temper in Gainesville. I think Dan Mullen would be a great fit for Alabama, but I agree with you. I don't know how excited Dan Mullen would be about kind of jump in and coach at Alabama, take a back seat when he could probably get a head coaching job somewhere else in college football if he just waits another year or two.
Yeah, it's a very strange equation, but I think you take that out of it. I think this is a guy that's certainly going to be on high alert for Nick Saban. Looking at the last guy on our list, the guy you wanted to add, Nick, Casey Woods, SMU offensive coordinator. Some of his notable experience, 6 years with Auburn, has a very close relationship with Gus Malzahn. He was a tight end coach and a recruiting coordinator at Missouri the past 2 seasons. And then this past year, of course, he was at SMU. This is a guy that's from Starkville, 39 years old. So he grew up around SEC ball, and he's been around it with his experience at Missouri and there with Auburn. The biggest problem for me, though, Nick, is Rhett Lashley was there to hold his hand. The town of SMU, left over by Sonny Dykes and his team, already had a year of experience together. Guys like Rashee Rice, Tanner Mordecai. This is not a team that lacked continuity one bit. And he only has 1 year of being an offensive coordinator under his belt. He's going to have a lot more control at Alabama, I would imagine, because, again, Rhett Lashley was there to kind of help coach him through things. This doesn't make sense to me. You wanted to add him to the list because you think, obviously there's a benefit to bringing in this young guy. I certainly think over the year, Woods will certainly probably develop into a good offensive coordinator. But right now, it doesn't make much sense giving him this longer leash of only 1 year under his belt. Doesn't make sense to me. Why do you think it does?
I just threw his name on as a bit of a wild card name. I think SMU's offense was kind of fun to watch this year. Of course, yes, there are some remnants from the Sonny Dykes era. I think Casey Woods has a lot of potential. This is kind of a name I just threw out there for a more younger guy. We've seen this in the past where Alabama's taken a gamble on younger coordinators. They did it with Pete Golding, where they take a gamble on younger coordinators who have good recruiting, right? This guy's a great recruiter, was part of recruiting at Missouri, was part of recruiting at UAB. In the past in Missouri, recruiting with Eli Drinkwitz, they landed some solid players. I don't know how much of a role he had in that, but they landed Luther Burden, who's solid wide receiver, 5-star wide receiver. So I think there is some serious sort of story to be told there. 1 season, yes, a little small of a sample size, but this is a guy to watch out for. It may not be landing the job this time, but it's a guy I want to look out for the future for Alabama. I think he has potential to rise in the sport. He has ties to the SEC with Auburn, with Tennessee, with Missouri, was also in the state at UAB. This is a name that's a wild card name, but if it happens, I think it would make a lot of sense.
Now, speaking of some wild cards, here's our honorable mentions list. Jeff Lebby seems to be a name getting thrown around for some reason. I don't think he's going to leave Oklahoma. He and Brent Venables teamed up for a reason. I think they have a great vision there. Charlie Weiss Jr., Ole Miss co-offensive coordinator currently. I think this would be an opportunity for him to have full control over an offense. He does have Kiffin as a former mentor. They've worked together many years, so obviously he'll probably get a good recommendation from Lane. Brian Johnson, he has some ties to Alabama, currently is the Eagles quarterback coach, and Jalen Hurts has been absolutely terrific this season, so that's obviously going to help boost his resume. Shea Tierney, working under former Alabama OC Brian Dable as the Giants QB coach this year, and I threw Jim Malcolm-Wayne on this list just because I feel like he's done a pretty solid job at Central Michigan. They weren't as great this past season, but 2 years ago, that was a very impressive football team. I do think his former ties to Nick Saban as well. I think it's worth, at McElwain's team reaching out to Saban to see if he's interested in reuniting. Who's your biggest name on this list you think that could potentially join Alabama?
I think Charlie Weiss Jr. is an interesting one to look at. Ole Miss offense, of course. Lane Kiffin has a huge hold on that offense, but Weiss has done some good jobs there. Some of the quarterback play at Ole Miss has been pretty good. I know this past season wasn't as good, but in the past, Matt Corral was a solid quarterback for Ole Miss. I think they were building something there. Weiss is a young mind in college football, great ties with his family, with past coaching ties as well. I think he makes a lot of sense potentially as more of a bit of maybe a fun option might be the right word for it. I think Jeff Lebby's the one that makes the least sense out of it on this list. I think Lebby just is not going to leave Oklahoma at this point. I just don't think it makes a lot of sense for both parties involved.
And Weiss Jr. was working with Alabama as an assistant 2015 to 16. He is only 29 years old, though very young guy. But of course, with the lineage he has, maybe it's worth the gamble. In the past 2 years at USF really did not go all that good, though. Now he's back with Ole Miss. The previous tenure at FAU, though, with Lane Kiffin was very successful. So we'll see what happens. I do think I'd be kind of shocked if we don't see one of these, 10 names or so, not ending up as this job. I think it'll, at the end of the day, potentially probably be Dan Mullen if I had to bet money on it. It's going to be it for today's episode. As always, Nick, I appreciate you joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to seeing what direction Alabama goes here. I really hope they nail this offensive coordinator hire so that Alabama can get back to winning ways and bring a national championship back to Tuscaloosa.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.